Okay, Alan.
Right, welcome everybody. It's a dark evening over here. It's a bit cool, but probably not as cool as it is where you live. I've been involved with this project at our church probably for almost 2 years now. It started because we part of the church was built in about 1965, which is relatively new. But the previous church is actually our church hall now, and that was built just over 100 years ago, so that was getting a bit old and tired. So there were some schemes that were going on around this area. I don't know if any of you have heard about the new train line that they're building, a high-speed train line they're building in the UK. It goes within about half a mile of where our church is. And they offered a scheme which actually was offering to help communities along the train line to try and support activities, just along the line. They had a limited amount of funds, and it sounds a lot, but when you start bidding for this stuff, it's not actually quite so much. There's various schemes that were available. You could either offer up to £10,000. You'll have to convert this into Canadian dollars. And the next level up was you could go from £10,000 up to about £75,000. And then if you had a really big project, 75 up to £250,000. Well, each time you go up the line, you have more forms to fill in. Up to £10,000, you probably fill in probably about 2 sheets of paper. And over £75,000, you probably have to fill in a book and probably have to go to lots of committee meetings. It's probably the same where you are. I thought about our old church hall, and probably like a lot of places, our church hall is actually hired out during the day, during the evening, during weekends for various things. We have a school that uses the church hall facilities during the week, and we have lots of things in the evening and the weekends, dancing parties, bar mitzvahs, all sorts of things. And all that money is actually going into the church funds to actually support the growth and the general income of the running of the church. So obviously this scheme, they weren't going to give you sort of money for doing nothing. So you have to fill in quite a few forms. And basically the theme was if I could actually apply for some funds, which will actually be almost like a green fund of various things we could actually do to the hall and its surrounds. I thought that would have the biggest opportunity of a chance of actually getting some money. So I bid for this £75,000. I found a friendly builder, one that's worked on our house previously, so I knew how to talk to him. And we actually worked through a scheme about what things we could actually do to the hall. So principally, besides the painting and decorating, we thought about the environmental aspects of the hall. One was that we've got a boiler house which supplies the central heating and also the hot water to the various toilets and kitchens. And if we think about the boiler down one end of the hall, and the toilets right down the other end of the hall, so people were going into the toilets, turning on the hot water tap, and by the time the boiler had fired up, shoved all the hot water through the pipes, which took about 60 or 80 feet. By the time they had actually waited there for about 2 minutes and it's still cold water, they turned it off and not use hot water at all. So you're wasting all this clean water, all the gas in the boiler room, and the person wasn't actually getting any hot water in anyway. So we thought we'd actually change that by putting electric heaters on all the taps, and that's been a great boon to do that. The electric heaters on the taps are very cost effective. They only cost probably about £100 or so per water tap, and that's then gives you pretty well immediate hot water or warm water. The other thing to do was we ran around all the lighting of the hall, inside and outside. We had various types of lighting, tungsten, fluorescent, all sorts of things, all sorts of stuff we've been installing over the last 20, 30 years. and we decided to change everything to LED, and that's been a great saving as well. So whereas we'd had probably about 8 tubes of fluorescent tubes in our hall, they've replaced those with 4 tubes of LED, and it's much brighter, and it's probably a tenth of the cost. And those types of things have actually helped us through it. The other thing was, which we're basically going to talk about, the electric car charger points. I was thinking about how we could actually try to help this bid by actually being green on that side of it. And we were thinking about, do we do air source heat pumps or groundwater heat pumps? And at the moment they're a bit new. Well, they certainly are over here, and they're not particularly effective either. So we particularly discounted that idea, and we actually came up with the idea that rather than having that, we'd actually just carry on using the gas at the moment. The electric car charger points were another feature that we thought we'd actually do. We'd never tried this before, and there's very, very few in the district around there. And we looked about what we could do with these car charger points, and they look fairly simple. You see them mounted on somebody's wall or a post somewhere, and all you do is actually plug the cable into your car and get it charged. But it's not quite that easy. So what we did, we found a friendly electrician, one who had experiences with doing electric car charger points in the first place. So we talked to him about what type of model of car charger we could actually deploy, the number of units that we would actually have. You can either have an individual car charger with either one cable that can plug into it, or you can have these units where you can actually plug cables in either side. And that's, you just look in a catalogue and you can put your finger over there and decide yourself what type of charge you actually want to do. Well, we elected to have a particular type of car charger, and we submitted this bid. But like all bids, when you go to these government authorities, it takes an age for them to actually come back, and they ask many questions. And it took about a year before the paperwork initially was submitted, before we got the okay to actually proceed. By that time, the car chargers we'd actually put into the bid had gone old hat. So when we actually went away to actually do the work, we had to buy something a bit more modern out of a modern catalogue, but that's proved successful anyway. It sounds quite complicated putting electric car chargers in, but they're not really. The boxes you get are pretty well out of a catalogue, and I've looked at if you look at Flow Canada, they've got loads and loads of these things in your own environment over there. So they're just things that you get off the shelf over there. The difficulty you get is of actually making sure that you get sufficient power into them, and also a sufficient network capability to go in there. Because these car chargers, it's easy to actually screw them to a post or to a wall, but you've got to remember that the people who actually plug their cars into these things, they don't want a trickle feed that you would probably typically do from your house or your garage. You'd want a fast charge. You want your car charged up within, say, 3 hours. So you want it capable of doing probably about 7.5 kilowatts or greater, or much faster than that. The other thing is you need a good network connection to these devices. Each device has we've got a broadband connected into each car charger, so it's got a very fast network connectivity. You need this because once the customer comes in and scans his QR code at the side of the car charger, it then has to immediately connect to the supplier of the electricity, and also go through and make sure all the billing is actually correct. So we eventually actually get payment for this amount of electricity that's actually being used. So the builder actually dug the hole. He sunk quite a large post in there. You've got lots of wood over there, so you don't have problems with posts of wood. You want a big chunky piece of wood, and you can buy these relatively small chargers that they get screwed to the post, and then you connect your network connectivity broadband to the charger, and also get your three-phase. What you have three-phase over there? I'm sure you must do. Yeah. So just say yes. You must have three-phase over there. Three-phase power.
No, we don't. Peter will explain.
Yeah, we have a split system where
Right.
we have 250 volts coming in, but
Yeah.
that's split between 0 and 125. There's two 125 phases.
Yeah.
So we don't get three phase from the supplier.
Okay. So somehow.
Doesn't matter, but I mean it's just a different system, and
Yeah.
it takes a bit of it'll be modified to suit whatever we need, you know.
Yeah, but I'm sure you would have the ability to have fast car charging over there. It just clearly our voltage system is different to yours in America, and you just have to work the system out to provide the fast charging scheme on your devices. So once the device, with the car charger have actually been installed, it's then just up to the public to go along. We don't actually advertise this locally. Now I think your scheme is that you want to promote this locally, and that's entirely up to you. But we didn't want the general public particularly coming into our car parks. We wanted the users of the hall to actually come in and use the facilities, because if they're plugged into their charger for 3 hours, that's actually occupying a car parking space, and our church only has probably about 25 car parking spaces available. So principally, that's what we do. It's a bit quick, so you might have questions about what we've done or how we did it. Carol's got a hand up.
Thanks, Alan. One thing I'm wondering, how much did you charge the user for a charge?
Yeah, that's a good question. We didn't know either. So what you do, the electrician that actually talks, you want an electrician that has had experience of doing car chargers. Don't just pick anybody out of your telephone directory. You want somebody that you know and somebody you can talk to that's done this before. And there are people that actually deliver a service to these electric car chargers, that they give you a big span of support. What we've chosen to do is we've gone for the minimum support, because if these things work, we shouldn't actually get involved. And the minimum support means that if we want to actually talk to them, we can email them or we can phone them up. But typically they don't do anything else other than that. They just run the system. And they've got a scheme where they said, do you want to have a low price scheme, because you might want to have one favourable to your church members, maybe, or do you want to have you want to sort of fleece people, you want to charge a lot of money, or do you want to go to the average price in your area? And I just said I wanted the average price for the area. So, people come to ours, we're not too expensive, but we're not too cheap either. And what happens is they use the charger, and the organisation that runs the electric car chargers actually do all the administration for them. They take 10% of the charge that the customer's going to pay them, and we get the 90% sent through from the car charging organisation. So we don't do anything with the customer, we don't do anything with the administration. All we do is collect the money. That's got to be a good scheme.
So does that mean that the user, does he have to enter a credit card number, or?
Yes. Basically, there's a QR code at the side of each charger.
Okay.
So they use their phone to link into the organisation that's providing the service, the electrical service, and they can then elect what sort of rate they want, whether on a slow charge, a fast charge, your credit card number, and all that sort of stuff. And we as a church don't get involved with that at all. It's just the administrative side of the people providing the service.
And sorry, just one more question. Is is the actual charge on a time basis, or is it a flat rate? Like if you choose slow charge, it's
Yeah, you can, you know, you can charge, you can elect to actually have a slow charge, or whether you want a fast charge. Clearly, slow charge will will take longer to charge your battery up if that's what you want. Or if you want to have your car charged up while you're at a meeting, you can put it on the fast charge, and that would depend how much energy is actually being drawn from the system. And the
Alan,
system.
is that option, like, do you have more than one option on the charger, or is that, you get what charger you buy is like if you get I think there's 3 levels, and if you get the faster 2, then if it's a 2, it's a 2. If it's a 3, it's a 3.
It's a range option from the customer's point of view. Obviously, the charger will either deliver a slow charge or a faster charge, as fast as the electricity will deliver at your location. And that's why I suggest you ought to have a fast charge scheme, because you don't want people hanging around all day long. If they get a boost in 3 hours, that's probably pretty good.
Did you have a question?
So if you get 90% of the revenue, how much is that as profit? Because you have to pay for the electricity, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. We haven't got a clue, basically. We just think we're doing okay. It's not sufficient that the Treasurer has actually bothered about it, which is always a good news. So yeah, so setting this rate to an average price of what the car charges are in the area, all over our particular town, we just guess that somebody's actually done the calculations, and we've just been fed the money through. So it's very, very difficult to actually do a meter reading when somebody's on the charger and when they come off. We don't have that. We don't have that information.
But the bill for the electricity that's used in that charger would come to the church.
It just comes off our general charge. Yeah. So we've not been smart enough to work that out. We don't know everything here.
Peter and Maxine, there's a question from them. Their hands up.
Just wondering, Alan, what kilowatt rating are the chargers? We have no idea because it's all new to us.
Yeah, we're using 7.5 kilowatts
charger. Okay, yeah, that's a useful figure to know. That's all.
Yeah, and that's deemed to be fast charging over here.
Yeah. Okay, because we have a limited, like every organization, we have a limited current capacity.
Yeah.
And we need to know the figures in order to know perhaps what how many units to put in place.
Yes.
I have just one other question, and that is, are you in a town or are you in a more remote location? I'm wondering about the passersby who might see it, or how many cars a day you might be using your service.
Okay, we're in a town. We live in a town which is northwest of London. We're probably about 25 miles northwest of London, and it's a community of about 40,000 people. The car park is not it's not one that's visible from the street. You have to come in down a church access road and then park behind the vicarage, and there you park your car and plug your car in.
Bruce, you had a question? Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Bruce.
Here I am. Am I on now?
Yeah.
Alan, thanks for your presentation. You said you had 25 lots in this parking lot. Have you got a charger on every lot?
No, we've got 2 chargers.
And so if I'm coming to a meeting at your church hall and there's 10 of us who have electric cars, how are you managing to get people to, who the heck's policing that?
No, there's no policing. It's first come, first served. There's no reservation.
Yeah, but Alan, if if my car's charged fully in whatever time, that person has to get out of the way for the next person to have an opportunity to use the charger. Who's policing that?
That's nobody policing it. That's for the people, the users, to do whatever they choose to do.
I could
Yeah.
see that becoming an issue in another several years as we have more and more EVs on the road. But we're probably still not at that stage yet, right, Alan?
I think you're going to, I think somebody else mentioned it a bit earlier. I think you're going to come up to a problem of what power you can actually supply from your church by having, if you had more than two, can your supply from your church actually supply sufficient, juice to actually keep multiple chargers going?
Yeah, I was more about the policing of the two. Like if there's 10
Yeah.
people at your meeting and they all need a bit of a charge.
Yeah, we don't police it at all. Anne Marie.
Like I say, I think it could be more of an issue 10 years from now. Anne Marie?
Well, I was going to say also, how frequently most people will be charging their cars in their homes. So it's very unlikely that you would get quite a number of people charging during a meeting, I would think, unless they're coming from out of town somewhere.
Yeah, that's tended to be the way that when we've had meetings, in fact, we've got a quite a large choir group that meet one day a week, and people come from quite a long distance, and a few of them have got electric cars, so they do request that their car park slot is actually kept available, so when they come in, they can plug in, and so they can actually get the car driven home as well.
Are we going to have one for the bishop in the future?
Not in our place.
Peter and Maxine, there's your hands up again.
Yeah, I was just wondering what Tony's Alan's talking about, where he lives. Did you hear that?
You want to know where I am?
Yes.
It's a place called Amersham in Buckinghamshire.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
And it's in the hills. It's not hills. It's 500. We're 500 feet up, so it's not hills from your point of view.
But my question on this is more related to, have you seen an uptake in people using your parking lot? Would you say that your insurance in any way would be affected? And have you had any problems with vandalism?
Right, no vandalism. We've got CCTV all around the sites, inside and outside. So that's 24-hour CCTV, which is something else I look after. We've not had any clashes of people wanting to use the charger points. In fact, we've been quite underwhelmed by the demand on the chargers. We thought it would be used a lot more, and it hasn't been. It's been very low uptake.
Bruce, you had another one?
Yeah, I had two questions, Alan. You said you went and bought the units, and then you talked about some company looking after them for you in terms of QR codes and charging and sending the money back and forth. So
yes.
So you've bought them, you've paid an electrician to put them in.
Yes.
And now you've had to hire a service company to take the readings, divvy up the earnings, and so how much are you paying for that? That's the 10 cents, or that's the 10% off every charge.
Yeah, that's the 10%. So we don't physically move any money across anywhere.
So who are those companies? You just have to find them, and they come in and tender with you to look after your.
Yeah, but that's when you need to find an electrician that's actually dealt with these people, electric car chargers before. Don't just look down the telephone directory for anybody that can do domestic power supplies and things. You want someone that's had experience of dealing with EV chargers, and they will know of the organisations that actually are fair to sort of relatively small users of car chargers. I can't remember what the other question was that you had.
No, I think you bought them. You paid to have them installed.
We paid for them. But for two chargers, including the installation, was £3,500
Yeah.
total.
Yeah, they're about 5,500 here each.
Okay, right.
Did you have you didn't have any other access to funding? Because I know, for example, that Clean Nova Scotia the Clean Foundation has come up with 50% grants, 50% funding. And I expect they just finished one in the fall, and I expect there will be more. Alan, just since we've talked to you, the federal government has announced that by 2035, all cars that are manufactured have to be electric, and they're estimating a need in Canada for over 400,000 charging stations.
Yeah, it's the same over here. I think 2035 is the same date over here.
Okay.
And that will
But how-
mean that
Okay.
that will mean that the electricity generators will need a huge increase in supply.
Yeah. And how long have you had the bin?
They've been in for about 9 months now.
Oh, it's really new.
Yes.
Okay. And when do you have any expected payback time when you'll break even?
Not really, because it was break even from day one because we didn't have to pay for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, Margaret, you'll have to.
Margaret?
Yes. What happens, we missed the initial intro and we apologize for that. Thank you for this evening. We're on Prince Edward Island, and we have a question about, is your church got solar panels that help augment its electricity? We do have a number of churches here. We have one in our very small, very rural place that is now net zero because of solar panels and retrofit. How does having solar panels contribute to dispersing the cost of having one of these chargers?
We don't have solar panels. We evaluated that a few years ago, but our roof wasn't sufficiently strong to put them on, so we couldn't put them in. So we don't have any.
Okay, do you have any experience with churches that do? We do have some sense that we can identify a couple of churches on this small island that might be candidates for bigger solar panels than we have in our very small place, that have used that to disperse cost.
I'm not aware of anybody that's got solar panels around here.
Oh, okay.
But Margaret Bruce he's the expert on solar panels tonight.
I mean,
St.
yes,
John,
Hi, Bruce.
Hi. Yeah, we have 50,000 kilowatt hour solar facility, and it services our church and hall. We haven't had a power bill in 2.5 years.
Okay.
But whether or not Peter Simpkin asked the question before, if these units draw 7.5 kilowatts for fast charging, we would need to ask some pretty tough questions as to whether putting 2 or 3 of those in, and they were all being used, what the draw would be on our total solar production.
Yeah.
And we have really, we aren't in trouble yet, but the number of cloudy days these last 7 months has been enormous. And even though they still produce, Peter Simpkin can answer better than me, they still produce on a light day, but nowhere near what we should be producing.
Well, we have solar panels here in our house, a panel in the field, and we can identify with that. I guess I'm going to intrude by speaking to the PEI situation just for a few minutes. We're a very small island. I'm Anglican. My husband is United Church. Reception, internet, electricity on both extremes of this island are very limited. When we're talking about solar panels, we have a few churches that are in what we would call urban here, no one else would, centers, with no parking lot. So they'd have to negotiate with the town to put a charger in. But the cost of electricity on this island, which is all right now mostly imported, is very high. I think the interest here would be, could we attract people to say, oh, that church has a solar panel, an EV charger? Isn't that interesting? I'd like to explore that. Are there any experiences in the UK in more remote areas of trying to do this?
I'm not aware of any, but being quite honest, I've not actually looked into that at all. So I don't know. Is that something you would like to find out about? Or?
Well, I think that we'd have to do some investigation here locally first. It's interesting. I didn't realize that you needed good internet. This is also an island that, if you're not in the central part of it, has really, really bad internet. So I guess that this gives us some questions to take back and start asking locally, which are helpful questions, I have to say. Because I can see that there would be, this is a tourist hub. That's one of our big economies here. The more remote ends of this island are places that people with electric cars are running into problems with because there aren't charging stations. And there is an interest on the island to try to deal with that. But it just never occurred to me that you need an internet connection until now. So I thank you, because you're giving us questions that we now need to apply locally. As Peter said, the one of our churches that is now net zero with solar panels, I don't know if it could cope with the drain of having a charger, but it's in such a remote area, I don't know if any tourists would ever find it. But I want to thank you for those questions, because they're interesting and they're intriguing, and they could lead us to then encourage some of the churches in centers to look at other questions in relation to this. So thank you. I won't take up any more of your time.
Yeah.
But if you ever come to PEI, we'd like to give you a tour.
Actually, there was a question I had that came out of that. Is your internet, is that connected to your Wi-Fi in the hall, or how does that work?
Yeah, we've got what we call a broadband input into our church office, and that we've actually just radiated around the site. So I use it on a Sunday morning because I do live streaming, but that's when the office isn't there. So I'm piggybacking on the back, and we just extended the route around, so we actually get it in directly into the EV chargers as well.
Okay. Yeah, because so many churches have that are not in really remote areas have Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
For others, it's still having a toilet that counts.
Yeah.
Peter and Maxine, your hands up.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, we had to make a link between our church and hall, and we did that with a remote antenna, and that's been working fine for several years. And we had to have a transponder, an expander at the church end so that we could cover the church area. But that also does outside the church as well to a certain range. So I don't think technology, I don't think technically it's a problem these days. I say we did it 2 years ago, and it's been running fine on its own.
But interestingly enough, what I think you're saying, Alan, is you don't know. You can't separate the income from the electrical cost, so you don't know if you're covering your costs or not.
No, but as I say, because we've taken a midpoint on the charging.
Yep.
I'm just, we haven't actually looked in detail of whether it's actually making money or losing money. I very much doubt that we're losing money. I really doubt that.
Go ahead, Bob.
Is there any, are there churches who would investigate one of the commercial companies to get them to do all the installation. And there would be a charge for the use of the land and spaces available, rather than trying to work it through the electrical system of the church property itself.
Yeah, well, where we're actually situated, we're in what they call the Oxford Diocese, which is a very large diocese in the southeast of England. And I don't know of anybody else that's got EV chargers. I've had to write this report, which is the one that Marianne actually picked up, on what we've actually done in our church, and that's been propagated around the country. So I'm not too sure that there's any. I didn't have anybody else that I could refer to. I just didn't know anybody in any church, whatever denomination, had done this.
Right.
And that's not uncommon. I was able to learn that there is one parish in Toronto that put in one EV charging station, and only because the priest had an EV car, and that was the condition.
Yeah.
Like, I'll come if you will install. Now, I do also know Anne-Marie and I. Now, Anne-Marie, what do you remember about the Ottawa experience?
Yes, well, they had gotten a grant and got a number of churches. This was United Church, working with Faith in the Common Good. They had gotten a grant to enable a number of churches to involve these, to put in chargers. And in the end, I think they ended up with only 2 out of 10 or something who decided to go ahead with it. Yeah, but I'm not sure how it compares to Allen's, because we did have a presentation from Charlie, who was the person at Faith in the Common Good who talked about this. But it did have something to do with cost at the time, I think. They would have to pay a certain percentage, or it was an equalizing grant where you paid a certain amount and then they, so of the 10, I think, who were first interested, well, I don't think there was really any commitment, but there was interest, but they do have a couple whom we, I think Mary and I talked about probably having a follow-up session where Charlie would talk about that Canadian experience in Ottawa. But these are, I think it was 2 United Churches, if I remember. Is that correct, Mary?
Yeah. So they're really limited here too. Like I say, it was 2 years ago when the bishop had brought up this idea, and the initial idea was to offer our parking lots for the installation. So Anne-Marie sent out a letter to all of the municipalities within the province of Nova Scotia. Sorry, PEI people, we didn't do PEI, but we only got 2 responses, one from Lunenburg County and one from the Halifax region. The Halifax region was really keen on it. As a matter of fact, when I went to do my hard sell with these 2 people on a Zoom meeting, the response was, "This is the best thing that's ever happened to us," which surprised me. I only had to come up with 1 sentence and they took the rest. But the wheels of government, whether it be municipal, provincial, or federal, move slowly. And so it was a year and a bit before they even got back to us from the HRM, and they asked they said, we want to put in 5 stations in at St. James Church in Armdale. And as it turned out, they didn't even realize that was already municipal land. It wasn't church land. It was a good experience for them, and the people of Armdale, unfortunately, were disappointed. But anyway, so we've tried that, and so we're not quite sure about direction, and we thought we will present Alan's experience first, and then we need to look at, what are the options here? What would happen if we talk to the Clean Nova Scotia and or the equivalent in PEI, and asked about the possibility of grants and what could be done and what else. And Anne Marie and I would like to take some time and speak to our member of parliament in Halifax.
I'm still, excuse me for jumping in, Marianne, but I'm still confused with what you're trying to do. Why would we do that?
Well, we want to see how much funding we can get, Bruce, and how
How much
amenable.
money, how much money to pay for the units, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, who cares what? I mean, are you suggesting that we open church parking lots to the public and advertise access to these things? Is that
Well,
where
not
you're going with this?
But that
Hmm?
would depend on the parish. Everything depends on the parish. And so, but if the federal government is, I see somebody put up a link there. If the federal government is saying we need 400 and some odd EV charging stations, my question is, what's the plan? What's their plan, and how might what we're doing be impacted by that plan? So I think we also need to know that. The more we have, the more knowledge we have, the better. But this is a learning curve, Bruce. We don't have all the answers at this stage of the game. We are gathering really the questions.
Because in Alan's situation, they're not advertising to the public at all. They're just looking after their parishioners at meetings and hall use.
Yep. And that's what's working for them.
Yeah, well, I think it would be a policing problem to offer it to the public personally, but
I don't know. So we have learning to do. We have a learning curve.
I mean, but does anybody know if there's income here? Does any who?
And I think that, it shouldn't be based on income. I think it should be based. Oh, Anne Marie, you were going to say something?
Yes, I was saying that part of the, at least as I understand it, it's becoming, was conceived as a kind of outreach program for churches. Like a lot of church parking lots, at least ones I know of, are empty most of the time, even during church times now. So the idea was that if they're in a community, especially if it's an energy poor community, that the offering of these things would actually be an outreach project for the church. So it doesn't mean church people couldn't use it. But the idea of policing, I mean, the thing is nobody polices the ones that are, for example, in the public library here, or that are at the harborfront, or that are next to the Best Western Hotel where we go. They're just there. So and anyone with an electric car, which we have at the moment, has a screen which tells you where are the available stations, and is somebody using them at the moment, or are they not? And when is it free, and is it working? And so people choose their place to go based on that. So they would know in a car whether or not something is in use before they would get there. So all the stations are on a map, and you find them that way. But so if a church parking lot has one and it's offered to the community, then community people would know before they got there whether or not the station was in use and whether they'd have to line up for it. So I don't see policing as much of a problem, especially if there are enough of them because right now it's very rare to see more than one pulling up to a station at any particular time, because there's so few cars overall that are electric. I think
Debbie? Oh, sorry, Anne Marie, you finish what you were going to.
Margaret had her hand up.
Yes, if you don't mind, and I'm sorry, because I want to thank Jordan for putting up the link for PEI. Marion, maybe after this, could you link some of us on PEI by sending emails? I'm wondering, in our context, and I think we need a separate meeting about how we do this maybe locally, but I'm thinking of, we have at least one, if not a number of churches on Prince Edward Island that are on the Cross Canada Trail, the walking trail. Confederation Trail called here, where having a charging station would be very beneficial. You can go, you can walk, you can cross-country ski, you can walk for hours, come back. I like this previous comment. How do other agencies fund these? I know here on Prince Edward Island, for tourists, the salvation is that Parks Canada has charging stations in the national park. But again, you get stranded on the island, and you're not in a national park. Might churches be able to explore? I'm concerned with Bruce. If this plugs into our electric bill, that would be a problem here. I could see that would become a debilitating problem for small struggling churches. But if we can plug into a program where we offer the facility for something to come in, I'd like to explore that in a future conversation. Is that okay? Then I'll just leave it at that tonight. I don't want to take away from Alan's time, and I want to thank Alan for all he's offered us tonight. Thank you.
Debbie.
Just to address Bruce's concern, question, whatever. Just this being a fact finding and knowing what questions to ask, and or learning what questions to ask. But I know if we here at St. John the Baptist in North Sydney, we've got a very large parking lot, and our parking lot in the evening, we're not in a great area of town, and we have sketchy people using our parking lot. If we had EV stations in our parking lot, there would be the potential, and we would be doing this, providing it was cost neutral. Because yes, as I understand it, if we go with a system like Alan has in England, we would be paying for the power, but we would be getting back a substantial portion of what people pay for the electricity to charge their car. So as long as it was relatively, well, as long as it was cost neutral to the church, and I can hear my treasurer shrieking in the back of my head right now, but as long as it was cost neutral, I think our congregation would be okay with the idea of offering this as a missional outreach opportunity, because we're 2 blocks from the ferry that goes over to Newfoundland, and well, 2.5 or 3 or so. I'm directionally challenged, Brenda, sorry. But we're only a 5-minute drive, say, from the ferry terminal. But the nearest charging station, I believe, is in Sydney proper, which is a half an hour away. 20 minutes to a half an hour. So we were looking at it not so much. I mean, it'd be great if it generated income, but more in terms of perhaps making our parking lot a little safer. Because I would hope if there were EV charging stations in our parking lot, maybe the CBRM police would drive by a little more often. And that sort of thing. Like there's a number of sort of intangible benefits, like possibilities and benefits, that I know we're thinking.
Thank you. Okay, it's 25 after. And so it's 25 after 7 here, Alan, but it's 25 after 11 there.
That's okay.
Does anybody have any more questions?
No.
Yes.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. I don't know if where you live or what you live in, but if you're in a house, having an electrical, being able to plug it into your own house is, I'll call it easy or easier. There are, as you know, and I'm in Halifax, so as you know, well, throughout Nova Scotia, there are many apartment buildings. And so people in apartments are going to need some kind of facility. And I'm told that the putting them in the building itself, especially those apartment buildings that have, or condos that have underground car parks or facilities, if you were to put charging stations into those, it's obviously much easier and better to do that when you're building. But if you look around you, there are an awful lot of buildings that are already there, and all of the people in them ultimately, I guess, are going to have an electric car. So the demand for this will only increase. I would hate that this policing aspect it would become too bad, and I would hope that it wouldn't be in the short term, but maybe it will. But I just believe that for people who live in apartments, we have to use a public facility. Now I can go to IKEA, which is just down the road. So they have, I think, 5. I didn't even know there were some on the Halifax waterfront, but I don't have an electric car, but I'm just thinking towards the future. And yeah, it has a huge question mark in my mind. And I think from a church point of view, I think it's a great outreach program. So thank you very much for bringing it available, and thank you for inviting me or letting me come along.
If I could just say something, actually, the Halifax region, at least, has published a whole their, what shall I say, strategies regarding putting in and a timeline. And and they talk about areas that they are particularly concerned with that might need public help rather than leaving it, because the strategy in the end is to leave it to private business to do it. So, for example, Petro-Canada has chargers across TransCanada, but there are, so they're waiting really for businesses to pick this up. And I think we just found out that O'Regan's near us here, we're in Halifax, also has a charging station now. But the public ones, they're focusing on high apartment building areas, as well as other energy poor areas and then think the reaction that the HRM had to Marion's, asking them about whether or not they'd use church parking lots is possibly also fueled by that, because they have to find spaces to put them so where people can't have it in their homes because their energy supply is not up or old apartment building. We're in a condo, so we actually have a charging station in our spot where we park, but we had to pay to have it. We had to pay to get it done. It was usually expensive if you're in a condo building that's not already. And ours was partly set up because all our meters are in the basement. That's not the case with older buildings. So we had to pay to get a line from our meter to our space. But people it's going to be different. In some places, meters are on different floors and all sorts of things. Yeah, but anyway, that's a very good point. But energy poverty is one of the concerns they're talking about in terms of chargers.
Okay.
Anybody else? So I do want to ask, where do you think we should go from here? Is there you want to take some time, think about it, get back to me with your thoughts on tonight, on the conversation, and on whether or not there's still any interest from your church or your parish, whether or not you have any particular things you would like to know, like what about the Clean Foundation and getting them in to talk? What about getting somebody from PEI to do that on a separate Zoom, because it would be of particular interest to people on the island. Yeah, and so what's your priority? Is it the funding? Is it who would be installing it and operating it? Is it can we find, and was that another one, can we find or how do we find, or should we find, or do you want us to look for an electrician that has already had the experience? And I think we can go to probably the Ecology Action Center, maybe, Anne Marie, to find out more about that.
Probably, Chris, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's, yeah, and in PEI, who do we go to, Margaret and Eric? Can we find out who we go to and then share that information? And I think that this is the role at this time, is to share experience, information, to generate the questions. And then
if I was going to sit in on one, I'd like to hear Clean Nova Scotia talk about what are the grants and how are they available, and I'd love to hear from an HRM representative who can talk about, you said it took a year to get back to you, but what are they looking for?
Yeah.
If HRM is looking for areas where they can install these as public access stations, I need to hear from somebody who can tell us about that.
Yep, because when I talked to them, Bruce, it was really interesting. They said, you mean to tell me that you plow your parking lot so we wouldn't have to worry about that, but we'll do everything else, they said.
Well, I'd like to hear from the person face to face what that means.
Yeah, and for them, from what I gleaned from them, it was things like lighting and safety and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but
they wanted to know if we had toilets that were accessible.
Whose power are they drawing on? Are they drawing on our power, or are they putting in?
Nope.
Are they putting in the power?
Straight from the pole.
That would be.
Straight from the pole. Yep. And so they pay it.
If you know who that representative is, I'd love to have a Zoom advertised that we could hear from them.
There's two of them who have been hired by the HRM, and that's easily done. Yep.
Yeah.
I've talked to them a couple of times. Yeah. Tony Mancini, the municipal councilor, he's the person responsible for the environment committee for the municipality.
Yeah.
And
obviously what you're talking about is they're looking for locations for public access. Yes. I'd love to hear about what that means and entails. Yeah.
Yeah, and location means, I'm thinking about St. John the Evangelist, and 2 months ago, I wouldn't really have it at the top of my list because of where it's located in Lower Sackville. And where are you in Sackville proper? I'm not sure.
Well, we're Middle Sackville, but we're 2 minutes off the 103.
Yeah, well,
sorry, the 101.
Yeah.
The parking lot is seldom used during the day, maybe half of it, maybe. If they're looking for that, I would like to hear what the parameters are for that.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I can arrange for that.
I think that would be an interesting Zoom, along with maybe a Clean Nova Scotia representative.
Yeah, and so, like I say, 2 months ago, I'm thinking really critically about location if we were looking at as offering this as outreach. But today, with the need for 400 and some odd thousand EV charging stations across the country, I'm saying every parking lot has potential in it.
Well, yes, and if you're saying, I'm terrible with names, the couple who said they have an EV electric car and it shows on a map where these are,
Yeah.
when you're driving the car, then obviously they would be able to see where the parking lots and churches are, where these are available, if that's what's being offered.
And it's true. You can get an app that will show you every EV charging station in Canada.
Yes. Anybody can get that, even if you don't have the car. You can
Yeah.
get that.
That assumes I use apps, but I never used an app in my life, so thank you very much. Good start.
If you get an EV car, it's kind of one of those things that is.
I think it's really also important. The government sources are one angle to go, but I think it would be very beneficial to find out what the commercial installers are doing and what their kind of spaces are looking for, because I don't think government is going to move very fast. They have a record of doing so. And what is Flow, or what is ChargePoint, or what are the commercial installers doing, and how might they benefit this whole process is an extremely useful area to investigate.
So I'm going to ask a favor. Would everybody, I mean, you have our email address. Would you send your questions? Or who you would like. I have already started a list of who we should invite if we have another meeting. And so this is the idea, is to facilitate this for you so that, you know, you can get some of the answers to your questions, or even figure out what those questions are. And this is inevitably, again, you know, nobody's going to force this on parishes. It's just, you know, what direction works for you, what works for the parish, and does it, you know. So, Alan, I'm gonna kind of wind down now. But and I'm gonna suggest that we look at like 1 to 2 months for another gathering.
Yep, that'll be enough time to burn my brain out thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and our Healthy Coastline project is going to really be consuming a fair amount of time. In a great way. Really good. Speaking of great, Alan, it was great. Like, thank you so much for everything. I mean,
Okay.
it's
In the meantime, I can look in the UK to see if I know or find out any more of might have, you know, how they might have installed stuff, you know, even in more remote locations, and how they've managed it. But at the moment, I think I'm a bit of a lone soul in the sea at the moment.
Yeah, a few of us are in that location, Alex.
That just means we're trendsetters, Alan.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We'd appreciate it, Alan. Think of Hebrides and Northern Scotland, and you may have streams of Prince Edward Island.
Now you're going to have to you got a learning curve here with Prince Edward Island, okay, Alan? But you're like, you're always welcome to come to any of these meetings. But the other thing is, and we will have them at 6:30 to accommodate you. But seriously, you know, and any research you do, whether it be in the UK or in Canada, you know, Google goes internationally, will help us provide more information. And so, yeah.
I think Alan mentioned a company called Flow Canada. Is that FLOW or FLO, Alan?
FLO.
FLO.
But they are the people that I just searched Canada electric vehicle chargers, and I just did an internet search. Because they seem to be fairly large and in your particular region, that that might be a good place to contact and try and use some of their brains.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've got some of theirs in Charlottetown.
One's here Flow too. I don't know if they're on our.
So, so I hope that this was worth your while, people.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And you're all well. Yeah. So I'll keep the list, and I'll keep the conversation going if that's what you would like. And you can let me know if you're off the conversation, and I'll assume that everybody's still on until I hear otherwise.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
God
Bye.
bless everyone.
Night.
Good night.